Excuses. The only thing standing between you and your goal is the bullshit story you keep telling yourself as to why you can't achieve it. This quote from The Wolf of Wall Street was particularly memorable and stuck with me for the past 3 years, resurfacing every time I tried to make an excuse for myself. Excuses are an integral part of our lives, whether we want to admit it or not. We find ourselves questioning our decisions every time we feel insecure about something, only to make up an excuse attempting to justify our actions. Thank goodness I didn't stay up late to study for that test, you may say. I wouldn't have passed it anyway. Or, at least I didn't do as badly as that guy. Such informal fallacies are the very definition of excuses that we portray in our everyday lives, sometimes more too often than we care to admit. Making excuses, or in psychological terms, rationalizing, works when our mind's defense mechanism kicks in once controversial behavior or feelings are felt, resulting in us trying to justify our actions based on seemingly rational or logical explanations meant to hide the truth. More often than not, these explanations of our actions are made to be consciously tolerable or even noble in a plausible manner. When we are in the process of making excuses, it could either occur while we are fully conscious of making it, or when we are unconscious and simply presenting an explanation to block against internal feelings of guilt or shame. Excuses, for one, can only occur when the following steps are performed. When we commit an action due to a reason, whether we are aware of it or not. The excuse is formed to attempt to justify the act with a seemingly logical reason that hides the true reason for our actions. So now that you know what excuses are and how they operate in our day-to-day life, you may then ask, how does that concern me? Well, for one, making excuses is unhealthy and may promote further irrational behaviors in ourselves if left unchecked. And let's face it, more often than not, we tend to make more excuses than actual reasons when internalizing without us realizing it. Let's take a look at some examples of us making excuses in our everyday lives. One very common example of us subconsciously making an excuse, especially for those that are keen of exercising, is when someone comments on our size. Your friend may see that you're actively pursuing the gym every day and may offhandedly say, "Hey, I thought you hit the gym every day. Why are you still so fat?" An instant response when we hear that may be something like, "Oh, I'm currently bulking to gain some muscles." Now you may tell yourself that the reason is totally legitimate, but deep down, you're actually trying to hide your true insecurities. That you haven't had the discipline to control your diet, but you don't want to admit it. On the other hand, a common conscious excuse may occur when we know that we didn't prepare much for an activity or anticipated the needs and prepare a contingency plan in the case of failure. Your response after thinking may be, "Well, we tried our best, but some things happen and it can't be helped." Now, if you were saying it to a team of group members just to comfort them while knowing full well that such an unforeseen event had a high chance of actually occurring, that's consciously making an excuse just to seemingly defend your actions. On that note, however, there is a clear difference between making an excuse and making a valid justification. Someone who is fully aware of their inner thinking and capabilities may actually be making a valid assumption when evaluating his actions. If you routinely arrive at work 45 minutes early every single day just to make sure that you won't be late even if an unforeseen circumstance pops out, and yet the train does break down during one unfortunate day, being late for work, even with the 45 minutes buffer time, is probably not making an excuse. So, how do you effectively avoid making excuses in your daily life? If you realize that you've been making excuses for the better part of your life, whether it is subconsciously or consciously, Perhaps it's time to start cutting down on it. After all, empowering yourself with irrational actions and justifying them can only lead to a slippery slope where your life is filled with mediocrity and shallowness. Here are some tips that I actively use to remind myself to abstain from making excuses and get on with life. 1. Understand the root problem of why you're making excuses. Making excuses subconsciously is very different from making an excuse consciously, and the former is much more destructive in nature. This is solely because when we make an unconscious excuse, we don't truly understand ourselves and what we're feeling in the heat of the moment. This could lead to an eventual destructive nature where we continuously justify our irrational actions, leading to a life of mediocrity. I found that taking time to digest the matter at hand works for me, instead of shooting off what goes straight in my head like an empty vessel. Breathe in and count to 3 when you realize something is amiss with your actions. You don't have to give a reason for your actions straight away, but at least take the time to digest what is really happening within yourself. Finally, you could always talk to a friend to gain a different perspective on your actions. 2. Be responsible for your actions or mistakes. You'll begin to realize that with the absence of excuses comes the power of responsibility. And with power comes control. Control of your environment, control of your life, and control of your future success. Your actions, in essence, can only result in one of 2 things towards your intended goals: success or failure. The sooner you accept this fact, the sooner you will start taking responsibility for your actions, and you'll realize that the excuses stop coming. Ask yourself, is this genuinely the reason for my actions? Or could I have anticipated or done something to prevent this? Most importantly, if you realize that you're simply making an excuse because of a lack of a certain attribute, do something to fix it and learn from your mistakes. 3. Expect the unexpected. Let's face it, we've all encountered a time where we couldn't expect anything to get even worse than the current situation already is. Yet, magically, something came up at the last minute that absolutely destroyed the situation. Well, sorry to say, welcome to the real world. Instead of making excuses after the event has happened, you can make preparations for the challenges ahead. Nothing worthwhile in life comes easy to us. So start anticipating the future and focus on your goals. I personally have a full checklist of things I'm required to do in order to achieve a specific goal, along with a contingency plan as and when required. For example, in my preparation for a marathon, I had to wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and time myself, hopefully increasing the distance ran every morning. In this case, the contingency plan I set aside for myself would involve actions to rectify the situation should I fail to wake up in the morning. Living a life filled with excuses is both detrimental to your personal development and, quite frankly, doesn't leave a good first impression of you on people. The very last thing you want in life is mediocrity, something that holds you back from your true potential. Fight the fear in your life, understand your true feelings, and be responsible for your actions. Before you know it, you'll be making sound judgment calls with full control of your life. If you have any questions about areas of life where you're struggling or want to make improvements, please tell me in the comments below or write to me at Facebook or Twitter, and I'll make a video about how best to approach it.